1, 2, 3! Excelsior, you Oh, now we're here at the Limelight. Silly, isn't it? Yes, we're at the Limelight on Sheridan Square, right in the heart of steaming, fetid, passionate New York City. And you know what the slogan of New York is? New York is a summer fistfight. Hi, George. And we're down here, and we'll be here until midnight, festering and popping and steaming away. The temperature hovers in the 90-degree mark. The humidity is about 97%. It is at these moments that man's blood begins to boil. In fact, if you've been wondering all those years you've been listening to the radio when they're really going to say it on the radio, what do you mean it? What is it? What a rotten bunch. Look at that. Look at that. Here, every night I come down here believing that this is a clean-limbed, beautiful group of humanity gathered every night here to pay homage to the muses. Listen to what I get here. Sarcastic, snotty tittering in the darkness here. Are you aware, friends, that tonight is a full moon night? Already I've received 5 insane nut notes up here at the front desk here. Each one scrawled in a rugged handwriting. It says, I am here! It's a full moon night. Look around, friends. Yes, out of the darkness and from under those privet hedges they come. Each one of us has, though, don't you forget it, inside of us, a little gray, furry creature with red-rimmed, bloodshot eyes. Don't think for 1 minute those horn-rimmed glasses fool me, Dad. And those hair curlers. Oh, no. Inside of each one of us is this little sneaky thing. And you stand around. And it's going inside. Kill him. Kill him. And you drive, you know, you're out on Queens Boulevard driving along there, and you see this fantastic wreck. The guys are laying all over, the blood is flowing, and the cars are burning. And you say, I never look at accidents. And this little thing inside of you says, go on back, take a look. That's where the action is. Go on back. You know, it's like the Daily News. You ever seen those? It says, crash photos on page 3. And you go past this picture, Gina Lollobrigida, alderman caught in fantastic love nest. Whenever you go past the crash photos, just take a look at them. Look at that. And you see the Chevy all splattered all over Queens Highway. And you're sitting there with your little safety belt, sir. Oh, boy. Just living. And, you know, I think civilization is an entire structure to keep us out of danger. I think that's really what society is. It's a structure that we've built, a fantastic conglomeration of rules and laws and ways and paths and roads and cars and wheels, all of it to keep us out of danger. Have you noticed that in the society we live in, hardly anybody's ever seen anybody really dead? You know? You never see anybody born. Very few of us ever do. All the while we see people drive cars. They walk around, they've got clothes on, they look very official. We look sort of immortal, immutable. But once in a great while, a thing comes along where we know a guy is in mortal danger, and we all watch. I think most guys that are involved in brave things We're not even asked. I'm in the Army right over here at Fort Dix. Oh, what a place. Oy. And they sent about 25 guys from the Signal Corps there on what they called assigned detached service. No questions. I was at Monmouth for a while. One day they called about 25 guys. You're going over to Dix for a couple of days, you guys. Take your helmets. All right. So they send us over there, and there's 25 of us. And all of us have been trained in an esoteric Signal Corps art. We are trained in high-speed wire laying. Any of you ex-GIs know what this is? Well, it's about as close as driving the wrong way on 6th Avenue at rush hour as you can get. It really is. 3 guys stand on the back end of a Jeep, which has no governor on it, is going 79 miles an hour through the jungles and the swamps, and you've got a big reel of wire, and you're throwing a wire out. That's all. You know, you go up and down, you throw more wire out, and you're laying it, you see. And all the while, guys are shooting. And you lay this wire. You know, have you ever seen the scenes in the movies where Gregory Peck is on the phone and he's talking to the forward observation post? It's Van Johnson up there, or James Whitmore or somebody. Has it ever occurred to you that some poor slob somebody's up there with the wires, you know, boom. All right, so you got a wrong number. Shut up. You know, wrong number, I'll get your number. And boom, another one. And of course, all the while they're lobbing the mortars in, see, and what a high-speed signal wire laying team is really, it's a kind of a low-level suicide squad. And so we're standing there, and the captain says, all right, man, we're going to try a very interesting experiment. And, you know, it looks so innocent there in the sun at Fort Dix, you know. We're going to try a new method of laying wire. What do you think is warming up 45 feet behind us? A DC-3. And there's a strange-looking rack on the bottom of it. And he says, all right, I want the five guys on the end. Guess who was number 3 from the left? I don't know, you know. I learned later, that was early in my career, boy. After that, I'm always in the middle of the line, jostling. A GI learns to jostle both left and right simultaneously. You know? A guy, if you ever saw an amoeba divide itself up a million ways, a GI could be 7 guys, 3 guys on the end there, and all it is Fred. He's the truth. Personal camouflage is a real art, really. And so there I am, you know, the 5 of us, and we don't, you know, we still can't believe it. We cannot believe it. You know, we think that they're going to put us in the plane, take us to some other place, then they will put us in our Jeep, and we will have maybe dual carbs on the Jeep, you know. It's going to be the dangerous experiment. So the plane is going, and the captain says, there has been a lot of speculation as to whether or not number 17, double-stranded, M1/2 telephone communication wire, Series B, can be laid from the air. And the 5 of us, you know, they have decided to stop speculating. And he says, we're going to try this afternoon. What we're going to do, man, first of all, we're going to get into this thing gradually. How do you get in the air gradually? Immediately at my mind, he says, we're going to try short segments of wire laying. We're going to fly at an altitude of 150 feet. And here is the way the rack works. Sergeant Haskell will show you. And old Haskell says, come here, man. Get up here in the plane. So we climb up in the plane, and I'll tell you, a military airplane does not look like American Airlines. There's all kinds of little things that says, escape. In case of enemy fire, pull this. You know, all sorts of things, you know, little things to hang on to when it's going down. And it's just nothing but a little thin, apparently a little thin shell of Reynolds wrap between you and the fantastic things that are out there. So we're standing in this plane. They don't even have floors in them, just little runways, and we're standing there. And he says, now, when we get over the wire-laying area, the navigator up in front will give us a signal through the intercom. This is the intercom. You wear the earphones. He will say, we are approaching the wire area. Release hatch cover. At that point, you, and he points to Gasser, my buddy. He says, at that point, you reach down and grasp handle B. See it? B. Slip it back like that. You, Shepard, get over on this side, handle A. Like that. Swing it back, snap it back on snap C. Here. All right, try it. Go ahead, Gasser. Gasser gets down there. I get over here, I lift it up, and all of a sudden there ain't no floor in the plane. I can see the dandelions down there. And the hole is like 20 feet wide and this big, see? And we stand there, we're all sort of standing back, and it's only, the airplane's only about 6 feet off the ground, the thing goes down, and it looks like you're a mile high already. We're standing around. There's a little place to stand, We're all looking down, and he says, all right, now you. Over there, you two. You press lever C. You see it down here on the winch? The minute you do that, you throw out chute D. Chute D is there. It's a little chute on the end of the wire. Throw it out. It will begin to unreel. Watch the counter. The minute you hit 17.5, snap it off, close the hatch, and signal the navigator the wire has been laid. Any questions? There are some questions you can't phrase. You can't put them into words, and I'm thinking, all I got to do is pull back, snap A, Gasser's on B, and Gasser, and the five of us. The sergeant crawls down, and he says, they're going to lay the wire over this area, right here to the left of the landing strip, over the trees, and past the water tower. We want to see how it works in uneven terrain. Any questions about that? All right, men, good luck. And we're sitting there, and up in the front, you can see the navigator, the crew chief, and the pilot. Everything is open in a warplane, it's everything. And something isn't working. They're fooling around, we're sitting there watching, they're getting the thing started, and it's very funny to see them start an airplane. In the Army, it's almost like a Ford or something. It starts, they just turn a couple of switches, and the wings are flopping. Oh yeah, those old DC-3s had a great way. And we start rolling over the dandelion. We get at the other end. I'll tell you, we're sitting there, and they got these little holes you can look out, and we can see our friendly barracks back there. Camp Dix looked beautiful. The sun is coming down. You could see guys going in to get their Milky Ways at the PX. It looked like the most beautiful place in the world. Guys are walking out, and this thing is going. And the plane is rolling. We get out to the end of what was the runway. It was just a long field, and we're sitting there looking at that winch. Some nut invented this thing. And it's laying there, and it's made out of blue steel. Somebody had welded it together. It's one of these fabrication jobs, obviously experimental. Had big white A, B, C levers on it. Everything was obviously just put together. We're sitting there, and then on the intercom comes our first lieutenant. And he says, all right, man. He says, I'm your captain. I'm Lieutenant Johnson. And have any of you ever done any parachute work? And of course, there we're sitting, and he says, look, he said, you all have parachutes issued to you, and in case of trouble, the crew chief will give you further instructions. Further instructions? What kind of trouble? And right there, we're sitting, and he starts with the motors. You know how they gun the motors to see whether the oil pressure is up? And they go, and you can see oil squirting out of this tub, everything's like, we're looking. Gases. My God, what is this? What are they trying to do? What kind of talk do they want to put over the wires? And then he turns it around, and she slowly looks down that runway. And with that, it starts to roll. Well, we start rolling down the runway, and we immediately, the five of us, are saying, this is not a bad deal. You know, this is not a bad deal. You know, I wonder if they're going to form airborne wire-laying teams. You get flight pay. Yeah, you get flight pay. Gee, that's great. You know, we got helmets, maybe some wings and stuff. You know, wings with wire hanging down, you know. Wire-laying team, a little silver wire, something, you know, combat boots and everything. So we're talking, and immediately, you know, we start thinking of the great stuff that's going to happen, and that plane is all the while going, blah, 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 blah. Well, a DC-3 that has had maybe 16 million hours on its airframe and like 458 combat missions on its two poor, sad, tired engines is the noisiest, insanest, scariest machine that I know of. Everything creaks. Little things leak. I don't know what is in the cabinet. Stuff is squirting out little pipes and stuff all over it, and things are rattling, and the windows are going, and it's up. Oh, you know, it's up for a second and sort of settled. We're settled. You know, trees are coming up and down, and it settles down, and you say, "Whew." Well, immediately after getting up in the air, we're about, maybe 500 feet in the air, and this clown up in the front gets on the thing. He says, all right, we'll be over the area now in about 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes? We're just up. You know, they don't mess around in the Army. They don't go out, you know, show you Rome and things. But below is Jones Beach, folks, so I take a look at that. He says, 2.5 minutes, we'll be over the area. Prepare your equipment. And one of the guys says, what do you mean? He says, what do you mean, what do you mean? Open the hatch. I get up. It's me, you know. And Gasser, and we both get up, we look down at this thing, and I got my big thing here marked B, and Gasser's got A, or I got A, and he's got B. We're standing there. We can't even figure. Gasser, what are we supposed to do? Gasser says, what do you do, pull it up or sideways? I said, well, Gasser, let's just both grab it together and pull. And so we're standing there, and with that, the guy back of me, Johnson says, hey, listen. He says, who's supposed to work the winch? And I turn around, I don't want the winch, I work this. Don't give me the winch. And I've got my earphones on, and the thing is shaking, you know. It's very funny, you don't feel at all like a hero, you just feel like, you know, there's some ridiculous stuff. And with that, Gasser says, well, okay. So I look across, and we pull this thing back, it goes clunk, 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 and for an instant it didn't work, you know, it didn't come up. Clunk, clunk, and the thing flew back, and there was the most insane torrent of wind. Papers, junk, cigar butts, all the stuff. This old airplane, you know, had been taking guys over Germany for years. We're standing back, and here it goes underneath us. The trees, insane, everything, water towers, and it's just a big green, yellow, brown, white. You ought to look straight down from an airplane. You know, you think you know the speed of an airplane when you're 35,000 feet above Cleveland in a DC-8 or a 707. Wow, 250, 400 feet above the ground looking straight down. You can't believe it. You cannot believe anything be like this. Just like a blur. It's like a Jackson Pollock painting that's gone nutty, you know. And we're standing there, and then he says, all right, drop the stuff. We're coming up, drop. We're frozen. He's standing. He says, what happened? Is the stuff out? We're here. What happened? All right, we'll go back around the course again. And so we're feeling, are we feeling rotten? You know, this is not the way Errol Flynn would have done it. We sort of stand there, and he is eating us out. We did not realize that the pilot is in charge of this thing. He is. And he says, do you realize the captain and 2 majors and a lieutenant colonel are watching? He says, I'll pretend that we were just taking a quick practice run over. He gets on the radio, practice run now. We're going into actual run down now. Going into actual wire-laying run now. That means there ain't no chickening out this time. So we go back around, you know, the plane makes that big, gentle, sweeping curve, makes the wings down, and he starts coming down again. He lays it right on the deck this time. And boy, you can see the trees, you can see dust flying from our wake. We're hanging on there. And with that, Johnson gets over, he's edging over by this winch, you know, it's over here, and here's the hole, I'm over. He edges around, He holds onto the thing. The other guy's got this little crummy parachute that's hooked to the end of the wire. It's got like little cables and stuff. He says, okay, we're all watching. The lieutenant is saying, ready, man, alert? Okay, back there? Give me a check. Johnson says, yeah. Okay. Okay, isn't it great how they talk in movies, those guys on the intercom? All right, Roger, 7 o'clock high, bandits at 7 o'clock high. You ought to hear the way they really talk on those things. 7 o'clock! Ah! They really do, you know. There's ex-fighter pilots. Oh, let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff goes on in those fighter planes you never thought, I'll tell you. Well, we're standing there, we're giving it, okay. He says, all right, at the count of 3, out with the chute. 1, he's gunning the thing. 2, 3. And Johnson takes his fingers like that. And it sort of, for a second, it's a funny thing. Disaster happens in slow motion. It just sort of fell like this for a second. It just sort of spun. We're all looking, all 5 of us. It spun over maybe a couple of times, a little lead weight on it, and suddenly it caught the wind. And it went, whee! Whee! And this wire is going on, whee! Whee! And the thing is screaming and is smoking. And we're stuck back like that. And it's gone completely out of its skull. This little winch is screaming, and it's going, bolts are flying. Johnson said, hey, Lieutenant. He says, shut up. What am I going to do? And the plane is flopping. Obviously, the drag or something is not the way it should have been, and the plane is going, this thing is going, and all of a sudden the winch goes, boom, and it hangs in midair for a second, and whoa! And there is silence in the plane. And the 5 of us stand there, and there's this empty hole. And there's this, you can see where it's been pulled out by the roots, the wires and stuff. All of our stuff is gone. The lieutenant says, how did it go? Johnson says, it's gone. And the lieutenant says, what do you mean? He says, it's gone. Everything's gone. Can we close the thing? Can we close it up, sir, Lieutenant? And the wind is blowing in, and all of us are hanging, like this. Check your belts. You got your safety belts on? You guys all got your chutes buckled? What? What's he leading up to? And the lieutenant says, sit down in your seats, buckle your belts, and hang on. We're holding, and the wind is screaming. All 5 of us are just hanging onto those holding rods. We make a big turn, and we see Dix coming into view again. There's those little white houses down there. And he begins to drop. And now we see coming up that meadow that we had taken off from. The sergeant up in front, the crew chief, is on the phones. Belts checked. Check your belts. Check your belts. The lieutenant's bringing it in. And then you hear the flaps. You know that flap sound? Boom. Whee! Boom. Boom. She comes in. Boom. And the worst part of it is all of us can see the ground right below us coming up faster and faster. Whoa. Boom. She hits. We're up again. Boom. 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 And then it's just rolling. We see the ground and the dandelions are getting slower and slower. And all of a sudden it stops. We just sit. The lieutenant just whips the back end of this thing around. He throws it. Blah, 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 blah. These are very cool cats. They don't care, He's whipping it back. Blah, blah. All of us are sitting there. absolutely unable to even think. We're just sitting. We get to the end of the runway and it goes duk, 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 chock, block, chock, block. These guys up in front, the three of them get up. Just like that, they open the door, out they go. Gasser, Johnson, me, we slowly get up. Down like this. Big hole. Watch out for the hole, Johnson. Down the ladder, you know, they don't have steps in these things. You go down the ladder, we're on the ground and our helmets are waving us down. And there is the captain. Looks at his watch. Men, I guess I don't have to tell you, that was a very poor performance. The Army never admits that it loused up. Never. When I was a kid, this was during the Depression. And during the Depression, there used to be magazines called stuff like Popular Mechanics. Do you know any Popular Mechanics? You know, it suddenly occurred to me, it's a great name, Popular Mechanics, you know. Popular Plumbing. They had all these great articles, even more than the National Geographic and Photo Play. Popular Mechanics is a pure magazine of fantasy. It's a magazine of dreams. And I remember pictures of guys, you know, those smeary little pictures that shows a guy standing like this. It says, Ezra J. Seastrump of Clearwater, Iowa, shown beside his model of the George Washington Bridge, which he built over a 17-year period using used toothpicks. And it shows him standing, and there's the George Washington Bridge. Nobody's working. It didn't tell him how to do things like we would learn today, like paint your car, how to build a breezeway. Nobody had anything. So everything was totally impractical. How to build a color organ. How to build a harp out of cigar boxes. Yeah, and piano wire. They really did have articles like that, and it would show this guy playing a harp, you know. Yes, sir, that's my baby. And the building of it was more important than even the concern for what it did, and more important than that, nobody built any of it. They just read about it. And they would think, gee, wouldn't it be great if I had a color organ? In the afternoon, Bing Crosby records would come on and it would light up blue and red. And I could sit there and watch all the colors. And in the back, this is where it really got serious. In the back pages of Popular Mechanics was where the dreams really grew. There would be an ad saying, earn big money in the private crime detection industry. And it would show this guy wearing a cloak with a high silk hat, with a cane with an ivory head. It says, there is Agent X10, trailing a dangerous operative. The Kansas City School of Applied Police Techniques will send you a free lesson. Send your name and address to Big Doe, Kansas City. You know, and guys could imagine themselves with capes, you know, and ivory-headed canes, trailing guys who had stole tires off the Model A's. Somehow it was a dream world. And one of the greatest of all the ads that appeared in the back pages of this particular publication, I once saw actually work. One time I'm this kid, and living next door to us was a guy named Brunner. Let me tell you about Brunner. He played a great part in my life because Brunner represents Beowulf, you know. Brunner was drunk through the entire Depression. He was bombed, you know. He was always... Brunner would come home, and Brunner could do things with apricots. He had all kinds... Listen, he invented jungle juice before there were jungles. And Brunner worked at the railroad 1 day a year. He was on the extra board. The extra board at the railroad means when everybody else is off, when all the trains have sunken into the bay, they call old Brunner. And Brunner would arrive down at the roundhouse and do whatever he did at the roundhouse, and then wouldn't come home for 3 days. He was celebrating his day of work. He would come home then 3 days later, and you could hear him crawling up the driveway. And you could see Mrs. Brunner there, framed in that screen door window, standing there, sort of fat with her flowered house coat, with her copy of True Story in her hand. And she'd say, "Easy, Ralph, the second step now, you're on the second one." And Ralph would come staggering up. He would reel in, and you'd hear the doors slam, and then you'd start to hear the yelling. And then it would slowly, quietly die down, and Brunner would be hibernating again till the next day that he was called. Well, one time, in the back pages of Popular Mechanics, there was a full-page ad that ran for about a year. And it said, "Earn big money at home in the triangular donut business." It said that there is a tremendous untapped demand for triangular donuts. And the ad was in big, bold type. It says, "Men, don't wait for opportunity, go after it." And it shows this guy with a great big coat on, with a fur collar, with a Hamburg hat, and you see trucks behind him. It says Triangular Acme Donut Company. It shows this guy has started in his basement with the triangular donut machine that cooked them while you watched. And there was a picture of the machine. It looked like some kind of a little chromium cage with glass windows on it. And it was a coupon. It says, "Don't wait now. Virgin territories are still open for the right men. You may be the right man." It says send their name and address, and you would receive the machine, and you would pay for it out of your earnings, only accepting a $200 down payment. Well, let me tell you what happened. One afternoon, a truck arrived, a Railway Express truck, in front of the Brunner's house. Brunner's house was one of those houses, with the weeds growing up out in front. Yeah, and the screen doors hung crooked, and they had a front porch swing. Well, Mrs. Brunner would sit there and rock, and one day out in front of their house arrived this big truck. And of course everybody's, the kids are playing ball and all that in the summertime, and they're unloading this truck, and old man Brunner came out. And he was all excited. You rarely saw him excited. He was all excited. He's out there talking to the guys, and they got papers, and they're bringing this thing in. And they're loading it up on the porch. It's a gigantic crate. The thing stood about 8 feet high. Of course, everybody's looking out of the window. What do they got, a refrigerator or what, Look at that bum. He hasn't worked in 7 months. They bought a refrigerator. What is this? And then you could hear Brunner ripping the nails down in the basement. It's all coming apart. And 20 minutes later, there is a knock at the door, and there is Brunner. It's the first time I ever saw Brunner dressed in a suit. He was a mechanic, he always dressed as a mechanic. And here he is in a gray, one of those knobbly gray suits with a little slight bulge at the knee, little tacky, but he's all dressed up. He's got a white shirt on, and he knocks on the door, and my mother answers. "What do you say? There's this man." And she says, "Oh, Mr. Brunner, hi, Ralph." And he's very formal. He says, "I'm here to take your orders for triangular donuts." He says, "I have opened a triangular donut route, and I'm here to take your order." Well, my mother sort of goes back, we're all standing there, and everybody, this is a real thing. And my mother says, "Yes, triangular donuts." "Yes, very, well, how much are they?" 26 cents a dozen plain, 31 cents a dozen with powdered sugar. My mother said, "Well, I'll have a half dozen plain and 1 dozen powdered sugar." thank you very much, Mrs. Shepard, thank you. Mr. Brunner goes down the steps. He goes to the next house where the Breiches live. And we're looking out of the window, you know, it's a wild scene. He's going, he's got a little case and he writes it down, you know, he's got a little book. They sent order books with it, you know, and the whole thing, he's writing it down. Next door, you see Mrs. Breisch talking to him. And then he walks on to the next house. And the neighborhood just hung there. Nobody knew whether to applaud or whether to get mad. Here's a guy really doing something. About 2 days later, bright early in the morning, you could smell stuff in the neighborhood, you know, you could smell all kinds of burning stuff and smoke is swirling, and you could smell it, you know, the greasy thing in the air. And suddenly Brunner, at 7 o'clock in the morning before breakfast, is knocking on the door. And my mother opens the door, and there he is, he's got a white coat now. He says, "Your triangular donut man is here." And he's got these things in a white cardboard box, and he hands them to my mother, and she says, "Oh, thank you very much. How much is that?" He says, "Well, a half dozen of the plain and a dozen of the powdered. Let's see, that's 47 cents, please. Although I can put it on the book if you want. I can extend credit." And she says, "No, I'll pay." And she goes up to the ice box, you know, and gets the thing out and brings it out. And she says, "Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Brunner." He says, "When shall I call again? Shall I deliver again before breakfast next Wednesday?" Yes. And Brunner goes down with his white coat. And we look at him, we're watching out of the window. He's got a little cart. One of the saddest things I ever saw. He's got a wagon. He's got Junior Brunner's wagon. He has painted it green. And on the side of it, it says Triangular Donut Inc. And he is now next door. And my mother brings these donuts, and she opens them up, and she says, here, come on, here, have some coffee, let's have donuts." And they really were triangular. Little triangular pieces of mud. And she passes them around, we take them, you know. They were just fantastically bad. Oh, they were terrible, just terrible. And you know, the kids don't even like them, and that's really bad. And chew them. My kid brother, right away, there's always a real outspoken kid. "Oh, Ma, these are rotten. I don't want any." And my mother's got a dozen and a half of Mr. Brunner's dreams right in her hand. And my father, you know, says, "You know, these aren't bad, especially the ones that have got the sugar on them. They're not bad." He's dipping them in, you know, so they melt and all that. Well, about 10 o'clock that morning, there is another knock at the door. It is Mr. Brunner. He's got his white coat, and he says, I want to ask you how you like the donuts. I am putting in a line of black walnut donuts. Would you like some black walnuts?" My mother says, "They're very good." "They were very good, Mr. Brunner. They're very good donuts." "I'm surprised. Where did you learn to make donuts?" He says, "Oh, it's nothing. I've been in business for years, you know. I used to be in the donut business before I got into the roundhouse business on the extra board. Nothing to it at all." He was really playing it big. Well, nobody in the neighborhood knew what to do. My mother is talking to Mrs. Breisch, and Mrs. Breisch says, "Did you get those terrible donuts?" And Mrs. Parker down the street comes down, you know, and they're all having the coffee clutch, and they're all saying, "Oh, what terrible donuts, what are we going to say?" And sure enough, like death and taxes, Wednesday arrives. There's Brunner. "Your donuts are here, I'm in a hurry. Donuts, donuts." He shoves the donuts, you know, now he's very brisk, it's his second run. And my mother gives him the 42 cents and brings them in, and we're hoping, everybody's hoping they're better. You know, he's learned in the week how to make them. They're even worse. He figures he's got a big business now, cut down on the shortening. You know, which at that point was axle grease anyway. Well, Brunner brings these things in, and they're just awful. They're just terrible. And Brunner then says, "What shall I do? Shall I bring any more donuts? When do you want? Would you like to try the black walnut?" And my mother says, "Well, Mr. Brunner, my husband's got diabetes. My father was as healthy as a fire plug. And he says, really? And I don't think the kids should eat donuts so much. I'm trying to get the kids to lay off the sweet stuff, and I think let's skip a week. And Brunner goes next door, and you could see the same thing happening next door. 1 week later, he arrives and says, any donuts? My mother says, yeah, bring me a half dozen. He says, oh, thank you. And gradually, he stopped coming around. And then finally, it was all over. And Saturday nights would arrive, and you'd hear Brunner crawling up the steps. He'd crawl up. You'd hear Mrs. Brunner saying, Ralph, Ralph, the second step is loose, watch it. You'd hear Brunner going down, it was like Sisyphus. And you'd hear him going down the basement steps. Then he'd boom, boom, and then it would go quiet again. Well, about a month later, I am down in the basement. You know how kids play in the basement? And there, back by the coal bin, with a bunch of old tires and old barrels, is this donut machine. It's covered with dust, oil, and crud. And on the side it said Triangular Donut Company. And I'm playing back there, and you know how kids are. They're very, I don't know what's with them. I knew what it was, and I'm playing with Brunner, and I says, hey, what's the machine? Brunner, what is that thing? He said, I don't know. It's something my dad's got. I said, what is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? All excited. What is it? What is it? And he opens the thing up, and we're playing in it, and we're banging around, and Mr. Brunner comes down the steps. Junior! And Junior says, what is it, Dad? Stop playing in my donut machine. Okay, Dad. And we crawl out. 4 months go by, and I see this junk truck out in back. They are giving him $20 for the donut machine. They're carrying it out. And Brunner's helping them load it on. Like this. Don't give up hope. The following spring, what do you think arrives in front of the Brunner's house? A gigantic machine to retread old tires. Baseball, in so many ways, is truly an American expression. Well, I am living out in the Midwest, and the Chicago White Sox have been for over 100 years in the second division. They owned it. They owned the second division. We used to resent it when a team would be in 8th place and the White Sox were out of it, It was just unnatural. You just felt rotten, It was like somebody's getting pushy, see? And so the White Sox were the last place ball club. Well, suddenly, out of the middle of the Depression, the White Sox developed a colorful ball player. Now, color on a bad ball team consists of being worse. Not like on a good ball team. Color consists of being Mickey Mantle, Color consists of being somebody like, well, who is, all right, I'll give you one guess. Who in the entire history of the Mets ball club was by far the most colorful ball player? Who? Marvelous Marv. Have you ever seen Marvelous Marv with that concrete glove out there? Wait a minute, Oh yeah, Marvelous Marv grew to be loved by the Mets fans because he was aggressive about his ineptitude. The others would fight against it. They'd cover it up, but Marv, let me tell you, when Marv made a bad throw from first over to third, believe me, it was Upper Decksville, That was Marv. Well, the White Sox developed a ball player. It used to be a pleasure to go out and see him. He was without question the worst left fielder who ever played baseball. No, he really was. But the reason he played, he was an instinctive hitter. He had absolute impeccable instincts. He was a .350 hitter when he felt like it. When he was kidding around, .320, that kind of thing. And
he'd play around at bat. You know, he'd come up there with the bats. He used to do a thing with his hips, you know, like this. He'd come up and he'd go like that. He'd wave at the audience. He would do a takeoff on some of the more prominent denizens of Greenwich Avenue. You know what I mean? And, oh, that used to make Feller mad, you know. Oh, it made those guys mad that because he didn't take the game seriously. He'd play around, you know. He gets up there and he'd do all kinds of bits. Like he'd come up with his hat backwards. Well, you know, I mean, what are you going to say when a guy's batting? He's got the bill sticking out in the back. He'd get up there like that and hit. And, of course, the crowd loved it. He'd drill a triple down the left field line with his hat backwards. I'll never forget one time he hits a triple, sure a triple, you know, he belts one out there, and then he goes down pretending he's got a wooden leg. You know, oh, Jimmy Dykes came out of the dugout, that's $100, you idiot! And he goes, you know, I'll tell you, he was... Now what are you cheering? You know, the poor son of a gun was getting busted. It's $100. Well, one day, this is what had happened. One day, it was a hot day. I'm a patrol boy. You know, they used to let the Boy Scouts, the patrol boys in free during the Depression because they figured that the back ends, the fannies of these kids would keep the seats clean. So we'd go in there, we'd sit down there, and one day, our left fielder makes 3 consecutive errors on 3 balls hit directly at him. I mean, you know, the kind of errors where he's circling under it like this, you know. He circles and, oh, like that. The last instant, you know, down, he runs, hits the wall, and picks it up and throws it in the stands. You know, that kind of, well, you see, and what was so sad about it is that the ball team was playing a fairly decent game, you know. Well, he was kicking it away, literally kicking it away, kicking the balls, everything. So finally, the score at the end of the 8th inning is something like 7-1. The pitcher that's pitching, you ought to be a pitcher on a 2nd division team out of town. You have lost 19 games. You have won 2. And you're up there and you've got this left fielder. And you're losing another one to Detroit. And everything you throw, you have that little thing that says, don't let him hit it to left field. That inhibits a guy. I'm telling you, it inhibits him. So in the 8th inning, score 7-1, somebody drills a ground ball, a single, right through short. It comes hopping along. The outfielder comes up to it, and suddenly he sees the ball. He gets one of his nutty ideas. He lays down in front of it. This one is not going to get past him, see? He lays down, and the whole crowd backs up, you know. And you can see Dykes rise up off the bench. You see his head going down. Here's the outfielder laying there. The ball is rolling at him, and he's got his glove. He's waiting. See, it's not going to go. The last instant, it takes a bad hop over him, all the way to the wall. Well, he gets up. The crowd is roaring. The runners are going around. It's a merry-go-round. You know, they're going. The guy that hit the ball, it's the longest triple he ever got, you know. And the outfielder gets up, picks up the ball. He's got it, and you won't believe it. It gets stuck in the webbing of his glove. He can't get it out of the glove. And he's forget it. Home run inside the park. Well, they finally get the side out, and he comes walking in. You know how ball players run in after the inning? Have you watched them? You know, they sort of run in. You should have seen this guy come down the side. He went right by the wall, and he's sidling in. He's examining the dandelions as he's coming in. Well, he arrives right down there by the dugout, and Jimmy Dykes says like that, just pointed, in full view of all the crowd, pointed to the clubhouse. Go. You're out of the game. The aftermath of the story is that all the White Sox fans got together and voted this guy, the worst outfielder who ever played in the majors, into the All-Star team. So help me, they voted him into the All-Star team. He made the All-Star team, and in the 3rd inning of the All-Star game, one of the All-Stars belted a long shot, and they said, it's going out to left field, and all the White Sox fans are sitting there watching. We'll show that rotten league now. He dropped the ball, the run is... Finally, the White Sox got back at a Yankee pitcher who was pitching. So losers, there are plenty of you out there, and if you stick with it, you may make the all-star team. Thanks for coming.